We're here today with Chief Superintendent Derrick and PC Roisin Vafaee from Sussex Police to discuss the issues around racism and protests that have arisen since the killing of the unarmed black man George Floyd in America. Can we have the questions from you guys, Jane and Roisin? We want to hear what you guys want to find out from us.
Yeah, so the most important question that I've been wanted to ask is, how has George Floyd death made you feel?
Firstly, I think when I found out, I think I was really upset, but kind of at a distance with it, especially as I was like, it's just another man being killed by the police, and it's not going to be the last one. And I kind of felt very disheartened by it, as I always do when I find out about police brutality and people dying in America for no reason. And then all of the protests started happening, and it has made me extremely angry. I don't know if anyone else has been feeling this, but I feel this core rage that I don't normally feel in my everyday life. I would say I'm quite a relaxed person, but it has kind of lit a fire in me, and I'm extremely angry at the moment. And that's kind of how I'm reacting to it. And I'm trying to channel that anger into positive things and using that drive to do better and help as much as I can. But yeah, that has been my main emotional reaction, is just anger.
I feel the exact same way. I feel so angry that, not just because an unarmed man has died, which is obviously very tragic, but the fact that it's not the first time, that's what's getting me. It's like, if it was an isolated incident, there wouldn't be these massive uproars and people wouldn't be as annoyed as they are. But it's the fact that there's a trend going on, and it's one man too many. Do you know what I mean? So everyone is angry, and I am definitely very angry. So I've been very vocal about it with, family members and whatnot. So I completely agree with you, Lola.
I think I can agree with you in that sense, that there was anger. There was definitely anger, to even say the least, when I actually watched the video. But one feeling I will say is that it's probably the wrong emotion to have felt with it, but I was happy that people were present at the time to film what happened. Like you just said, Emma, this isn't an isolated incident. This happens on a day-to-day basis in America, in the UK, maybe not to the same extent, or maybe it's not so shown, but this does happen across the world. And although, which we might probably get into further discussion about later, it has come out the woodworks. Obviously, George Floyd, he didn't have the cleanest record. He wasn't a law-abiding citizen. But at the same time here, we're talking about a man who has, record aside, he's been killed in a way that no human being should ever have to be killed, especially treatment that he received from another human being. It's just something that should never have taken place. And I am, I suppose, grateful that people were present at the time and acted the way they did. They were maybe not able to act in a way they maybe hoped to, because of the perhaps backlash that could have come from the police as a result of that. I mean, we saw the police in that video. They didn't plan to make Derrick take his knee off that guy anytime soon. Off George anytime soon. But I suppose, I'm glad that such uproar has come out of this situation. And you know what? As much as this might be a statement that people disagree with, I'm glad it's come at a time of a pandemic, because, to be honest with you, there was a quote, and I want to quote it. I need to try remember it. It said that the pandemic we face of racism is far greater risk than the pandemic we face now will ever be, and that really resonated with me, because it's true, this pandemic, it might only be temporary, or so we hope so anyway. We've seen what an effect that has had on the economy and the world as a whole. But this is happening on a day-to-day basis, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed soon. And here in the here and now, and people saying that we need to kind of focus on what's currently going on. Well, this is what's currently going on, and it's what's been currently going on for a long time. Pandemic aside, this is what we got to address in the here and now, because if we don't address it now, then when is ever going to be the right time? While people are angry, while people want change, especially the younger generation, we've seen that with the protests being initiated by the younger generation. We've got to address these points now while the momentum is high. And I think, so as much as my emotions are angry, as I can probably tell, I'm going red. But yeah, I was grateful that someone was there at the time to video that incident, and I am so happy that it is blown up to the proportion it has to now.
Yeah, I think it's not just really sad, which I think it is. It's also, I think, difficult for everyone because it makes people who don't even think about stuff like that, because in a lot of ways, you know, that type of thing, most people would think doesn't happen that much. So, you know, it makes people think about something that's quite new and quite different and strange for them. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of people do like know how they feel about it, but I think for a lot of other people it might just be really confusing.
Definitely, I think that's a really great answer, especially as a young person who maybe isn't so aware of racism. It is a massive big wake-up call, stuff like this, and it's not something that everyone talks about every day on the news. So yeah, I totally understand that confusion. Jane and Roisin, what is your next question for us?
The second one is, do you think that the UK police and the American police are similar, or are they distinct? Are they separate?
To be honest, I think you guys are very different. Obviously, there's some similarities in how you deal with people, but for the most part, if you look at, you know, how peaceful protesters are being handled with rubber bullets and tear gas, you guys aren't really doing that. Like, you guys are a lot more respectful over here, so I feel like in that sense you are very, very different. And I'm really glad about how the police and how media and things like that have handled the public and their outrage. Like, I think that's the main difference, is that you guys are responding to this act of violence with less violence than American police are.
I think in some ways they are distinct from one another, like you said, in the way in which they carry out the arrest and things that they do, and the manner in which they do them, but I do also think they're similar. One of them being that while America, they maybe do it very explicitly and it's very seen, I think it does take place within the UK a lot more, but it goes very much unseen. This could be because it takes place within police custody, not out in public eye, you know. I mean, I've got some statistics here, which if you guys want to hear them, I've seen, I can get the source in which it... So I've got some statistics here that say, so in England and Wales, black people were stopped and searched 9.5 times more than white people in between 2018 and 19. In England and Wales, black people were over 3 times as likely to be arrested as white people between the years 2017 and 2018. And BAME millennials are 58% more likely to be unemployed within the UK, and so on. My point is probably that I think while you are distinct in many ways, I think the system in itself, I think the problem is it begins with those that are in positions of power, like yourself, Jane. That's not me directing it to you at all. But like a house, if you don't have a solid foundation, anything that grows on top of that, it's not going to stay up for too long, or it will stay up, but at some point it's going to eventually come down. Yeah. My point in this is that there's people in positions of power right now, and exactly like why I say why the momentum is high, we've got to target these people and we've got to address them, because they're the ones who can make this change. They're the ones who can change the decisions. I mean, there's a lot of laws and legislations currently in place which are in need of urgent reform. In terms of being distinct and similar, I could say in terms of the laws we have in place, maybe they are different from each other, but both American laws and both UK laws are in need of reform. And I suppose they're similar in the sense that by reforming those, then we can start to initiate change.
Yeah. Did you want to reply to that, Jane? Just like your initial thoughts on what Gemma said there.
I joined the police in 1985. And I was just coming up for 19. So 1985 was a really important year for policing. So in January of that year came in a lot of legislation around stop and search. So the person that tutored me had no training about it at all. So I was the first set of people who used to go to a training school to be taught how to use the legislation. And I went on to your shift is called a section, but I went on to a section in Brighton. And the guy that was tutoring me, who set my tone about how I policed, how I learned everything, didn't understand what the Police and Criminal Evidence Act says. He thought that he could just stop someone and go through their pockets for whatever reason he wanted to because of what were called the sus laws at that point. And I come onto the section and say, no, you can't do that anymore. because I know I have to justify why I'm stopping somebody.
Reason, exactly.
Yeah. So that was in 1985, and we've never got it right. We still haven't got it right 100%. So everything that you say, I totally agree with around that. But upholding the law sometimes is really, really difficult. But we should be held to account for every time we have a conversation with someone. Having a conversation with a human being and actually using our powers are two different things. But very often people kind of, because they don't trust the police, they think, well, why are you talking to them? So I absolutely get what you say. The thing about the American police is, I think there's something like 43,000 different police forces in America. There's 43 different police forces in the UK. And there is one body called the HMIC that look and inspect us and hold us to account. Now, and it's not perfect, but it really does start throwing a lot of challenge on stuff. And we should be accountable. So all your points about, who's at the top, you're right. So I grew up during the 1980s after all the miners' strikes. I was here when Stephen Lawrence was murdered. I went to London after the London riots, after Mark Duggan died. I've seen it from all sorts of things, and I have been quite ashamed of people, how they interact with members of the public. It doesn't matter what colour they are, what sex they are, it doesn't matter. I've been ashamed and I've done something about it. What people need to see is people standing up and saying, you're not doing that right, and challenging it, so they feel confident in doing that. And I think you're right about, as you go up the system, I've been really lucky. I've learnt a lot, and I am in quite an important position now. So the protest that we saw in Brighton on Wednesday, I was the gold commander, so I was in overall command, and they had 1,000 people outside the front of the police station, and they were really angry, and they said really awful stuff. Yeah, they were. No, and I get that, but the point I'm saying is, we need to let people vent their anger, because we need to listen. And when I say listen, we need to effectively listen. And I think the problem with America is they all carry guns, and it's all about dealing with something straightforward. I think we're learning. I think we're on a journey. I don't think we're there yet. And I think the most important thing that you said about, actually earlier on, about you're pleased that people were there when what happened to George happened. If you go back to what happened to Rosa Parks in the 1960s, do you know that story when she was on the bus?
Bus boycott.
Yeah, nobody was there filming that, so nobody could tell the story. Nobody could see what happened. The value of social media today is it starts the debate, and then that movement comes. But there needs to be effective listening on both sides. So I think you're absolutely right. We do need to be challenged. There's lots of laws that need to be looked at. When I talk to you about pace, that's 1985. That's a long time ago now. So,
I was going to say, sorry, Jane, to interrupt you. I was going to say on that, because the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, that's been reformed quite a number of times. Yeah. I study law and I've seen that, and especially we did do a main focus upon police stop and search and the powers of that, etc. Having to, when you do so, you say your badge number, you say the reason for why you've stopped and searched, and try to justify that. And there's also, I don't know if you can tell me if that was one of the recent changes, but where an individual now who is stopped and searched, they are entitled to get a write-up of the whole process in which took place. Yes. Up to a certain period of time after that has happened. Yep. Has that been, sorry, because I can't actually quite remember, has that been a recent change? And
that was always there. So, but what happened was, you used to have to put a form in, and they would have to go to a police station, and they had up to 12 months to ask for a record of that. So that's always been there. What I will say is, in the early years, it wasn't done very often. People would write it in their pocket. It's in my pocket, but actually a third party needs to see what you did, why you did it, and provide that objective assessment. And that person is entitled to a record of it. So it's always.
And how do we know?
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and exactly like with the pocketbook, how would you know the sincerity of what they're writing within that, I suppose, if there's no third party involved? If what they're writing is true and how the situation actually unfolded in the first place.
Yeah, but you've got body worn video now. You've got lots of CCTV, haven't you? You've got your phones. So, if you're out and things like that. So there's a lot more eyes and intrusion. Going back to the 1985, I'm showing my age now, is my sergeant would regularly check my pocketbook for what was in there and the evidence that I was offering. And if we went to court to give evidence, that was where our first notes were written, and they should have been written at the time. And that was the initial notes, and then from there you would write a statement or whatever. So the pocketbook was, the old way of doing it, but there's lots of other ways now of doing it and actually capturing everything that's going on.
What inequalities had you already been impacted by, and has the pandemic made these inequalities worse for you?
I'm going to go ahead and start off with this one as the only non-white person in the meeting. I wanted to talk a little bit about racism. Obviously, it's something that is very prevalent in our world, and I'm very lucky to have grown up in a really safe community of Brighton where you can pretty much express yourself how you want and there isn't much judgment. But I have experienced quite aggressive, violent racism in Brighton. And I mean, I've been to court over it when I was 13, and when I was 15, I was actually walking home on Pride through the centre of town, and these two blokes who were probably in their 30s were catcalling me and my friends. So we kind of just said, oh, bog off, like just leave us alone. And he turned around and he said, well, you're just an effing N-word to me. And I was only 15 at the time, like I was a baby. And that feeling of like someone completely ripping down who you are as a person and reducing it to one word is something I can't even try and explain how that feels. Like, it's a really difficult emotion to try and express to someone who maybe hasn't felt it before. But I just wanted to say that and highlight that the UK isn't innocent, as we've been hearing so much about. We are still seeing racism. This only happened 4 years ago, and I was a small little girl walking home from Pride, which is supposed to be a celebration of inclusion and everyone being together. And I was still really shocked that that kind of racism is being used, especially by middle-aged white men. It's like you're saying this to a little girl practically. You can't even, I don't know, she's not even an adult yet. And it makes me feel sad for the little child that I had to experience that. And I just think we do need to highlight these stories, because they might have just been a one-off story, but I can guarantee that every person who isn't white has a story like that. And it might be when they were at school, it might have been low-level racism, but everyone has a story. And it's about time that we start sharing it, and it's about time that we do something about it and actually make a change.
Hear, hear.
I've got nothing to say.
Yeah, it's insane. It baffles me. That's why I'm so angry at the moment, because it's like, why don't people get it? Is there something that I don't get? Is they're all and everyone's in a little group that they don't, why does everyone think that racism is acceptable? I just don't understand. And it's infuriating. But yeah, I've said my piece about it now, and I mean, I am very happy that experience has happened to me, in a sense, because it has made me a lot stronger. And after they said that to me, I turned around and I started screaming in their faces, and I told them to come and say it in my face. And I did. I lost it completely with these 30-year-old blokes kind of thing, and they said you would be beaten up right now if you weren't a girl. So it's like, from every aspect, they were insulting who I was as a person, who they saw me as a person, as a woman, and as someone, as a brown girl. And it's like, I will keep fighting and I will keep screaming in people's faces if that's what I have to do. But I kind of think there must be a better way of educating people so they don't say that kind of stuff, or they don't feel that kind of hatred for no reason, that unneeded hatred. I just don't get it.
I'm actually so lucky because I've never experienced anything like that, and I'm very sorry you had to go through that, Lola. That's really, really bad.
Thank you.
Because it's okay. Because I do have white privilege, which is the two words that everyone hates talking about, and it's not really a bad thing because it's not used to slur other people, but that's a thing that frustrates me, is the fact that I haven't experienced that, but Lola has, is white privilege for me. The fact that I don't have to worry about going to a job interview and being discriminated is a privilege. The fact that I can literally turn off my phone and ignore the fact that Black Lives Matter, this massive protest, is happening, is a privilege. So I'm very lucky to have not experienced any of that, and that's all I'm going to say on it. So if people are listening to this and they're like, oh my god, that's what I do, you've got privilege, so enjoy that.
That's a brilliant response. And white privilege is being chucked around as being quite a negative thing. And it's like, I'm in a place of privilege. I live in a beautiful city where there isn't, I don't think there's loads of crime here. I haven't experienced extreme poverty. I am in a place of privilege. But at the same time, I'm at a disadvantage as well because I'm not white.
Because the thing is that people need to use their white privilege for good, because it sounds really bad, but it's going to take white people to make a difference in this Black Lives Matter thing, because they are in power, and that shouldn't be how it is, but it is how it is, unfortunately. And you know, privilege isn't a bad thing. It's used as a slur to like be like, oh, white people don't get it, or like you're white privilege, so am I, and all this. And you're just like, that's not the point. The point is that you could have financial privilege, you could have white privilege, you could have class privilege, you could literally have anything, but you need to recognise that you are privileged. And it's like the people who say that all lives matter. Well, yeah, all lives do matter, but if a house is on fire, you're not going to go and water down every other house in the street. You're going to go to the one that's on fire because they're who need it. So it just doesn't make sense. So I feel like, I don't know, I just think that we need to recognise that, you know, not having to go through what Lola has been through, for example, and not experiencing discrimination is a privilege, and that we are very lucky to have that. So,
Jude, is there anything you want to add on equality?
I mean, for me, I'm white and male, and actually I guess that means I experience privilege in probably more ways than I even notice every day. So actually for me to speak about this and for me to start talking about inequalities I experience is so much less important really than what other people have to say. So
Lola, can I just ask you a question? Have you ever been stopped by the police and stopped and searched?
Never. I've never been stopped by the police because I'm always smiling at everyone, so no one ever wants to stop me.
My foster mum, she is Black. She grew up in the Caribbean in Barbados. She has been a teacher, she's been a magistrate, etc. But she has been pulled over a number of times. She was driving a BMW once, I believe. They thought at the time she was actually a Black male. She told me a number of stories and things she's been through, but I don't really know the point I was making with that.
I'll tell you why. I think what she's saying is they stopped me because I'm Black and I'm driving a BMW. I'm driving a BMW. Does that make sense?
It's exactly that, and it's the presumptions that are made. I suppose she was Black and she was driving a BMW, it's a very nice car, don't get me wrong. I haven't convinced him to let me drive it yet, but so she was stopped.
Where this all came for me was a long time ago now. I met somebody, he was 15 years old, Black boy in Worth, and he lived near a railway station. And he just came and spoke to me because I wanted to understand what it felt like, because if I don't understand what it feels like, I can't challenge. And he said to me, have you got any children? And I said, yeah. And funnily enough, my youngest son was 15 at that point. And he said to me, how many times has your son been stopped and searched? And I said, none. And he said, I've forgotten how many times I've been stopped and searched. And every time they say, it's because you're Black and you're near a railway station. And I just thought, wow, and he said, every time, they never found anything on me. I told them who I was, and then my mum came out quite a few times. And I just thought, what are we doing? So he remembers that. He will never forget that. And I think that's what some of you are saying, where your parents or people that you know are telling you stories. And we've got to, at some point, just stop that and try and look forward. And that's why this debate is so important, and just trying to galvanise that. But how do we do it? And I think that's the point we've been talking about, Roisin, isn't it? Is how do we change things? Because it's not going to happen overnight, and a lot of people will pay lip service to it. Actually, we've got to do something and do something together. That's.
I think the answer to changing things, Jane, is everyone now, they need to start addressing themselves. To address current situations, we need to address ourselves, our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own prejudices. We're quick to make a presumption when we walk past a group of Black boys. Why do we think this way? Is it because of what's pushed into us from a young age, or what we see presented through the media? And that's what I was saying with people who are in positions of power, exactly like media sources, what they present to us. It's all kind of pick and mix. They pick what they think is going to generate attention from the mainstream media. And unfortunately, I think to make change, we've all got to start addressing ourselves.
So how do you feel then about protesting during the pandemic?
It's a really difficult thing, because I think while the pandemic's very dangerous and this could people protesting could actually cause some quite bad stuff to happen with it. At the same time, racism is a pandemic in a way, and like you said, it's just as big. So maybe actually, as long as you're being safe, it is just as important.
I love that.
I've had a lot of messages lately. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people who I'm seeing posts about this, you know, people saying, I mean, the names protesters have been getting for protesting during the COVID pandemic. If we don't do this now, while momentum is high, like I said before, then when is going to be the right time to do it? You know, as long as we're taking all kind of precautions, wearing gloves, using sanitizer, wearing face masks, I'm completely in support of this taking place right now. But yes, I respect everyone's views in that obviously there are people dying. And just quickly, I want to mention for all of those that are saying the pressure this will apply on our NHS system and NHS workers, I've received a lot of messages from frontline workers, from NHS members. I've got friends who are doctors. They've been part of these protests. I've got countless messages from them saying how they are in support of this. People obviously using the excuse and saying the pressure it would put on them. But I think the fact that I'm receiving messages from the people on the front line themselves, I think that speaks volumes for itself.
My question, I recently posted on our Raising Teens in Lockdown Facebook page, just regarding my own experiences protesting on last Wednesday on the 7th, and how I was keeping safe, because I was very mindful of it. And I got quite a lot of comments regarding safety and saying it was illegal and irresponsible. But then at the same time, Boris is tweeting on the 7th of June, and I quote now, people have the right to protest peacefully while observing social distancing. So I wanted to ask you guys, is protesting actually illegal? Like, would I get arrested for going to the protest on the 13th in Brighton?
Protest, it covers a lot of things, doesn't it? What I think where the Prime Minister is coming from is there's regulations about 6 or more people coming together. So what you probably don't know is that probably for the last 5-6 weeks we've had quite a lot of protests going on, where a small number of people wanted to come together to demonstrate against the legislation, but they've socially distanced, they've not come together in groups, they've had masks and things like that. So there's a real fine balance at the moment that we've got, in terms of we've got to keep you safe from COVID and try and stop that, but actually you do have rights to come out, and yes, you do have a right to protest under the Human Rights Act, but we've got to balance that. So if we were to try and stop you protesting, how would we do that? Then we put lots of cops in and we try and move you around, and actually the risk would be greater. So what we've got to do is work with you through something called police liaison teams. So I don't know, when you went to the protest, Lola, did
Sorry,
you see lots of people with blue tabards?
Yeah, so to begin with, there wasn't a heavy police kind of present, which I kind of appreciated in a way, because I feel like if you'd kind of put loads of police officers out, I think it would have made people more angry, and they would have just directed their anger at you, where it would have just caused more of a problem, I guess. And then once we went to the police station and then went to level, that's when the police officers in the blue, is it a blue coloured vest, the community people, so they were kind of at level, because there was a big kind of open discussion going on there was less people there, and it was really amazing to kind of hear from all of these people, and not having the police breathing down your neck as well, because I think that would have just made the situation so much worse. And so people needed to vent their anger, and they needed to come together as a community and actually share their pain. And it was really emotional. There was people crying in front of 200 or 300 strangers, and it was very powerful. And I think that it's our right to be able to do that, and I think it was amazing that we could do that.
So those people with the blue tabard, if any of you or anybody who's listening to this, if you go to a protest nationally and you see officers in a baby blue tabard, on the back of it says police liaison. So they're not there to enforce the law. What they're there to do is to work with you and to understand what you want to achieve, and then to feed back to people like me to say they want, so for instance, when you walked along the seafront, there was a big debate about actually how do we make sure you're able to socially distance. So we shut the road. So we shut the road so that you can socially distance and you can have your protest. And so that's what they're there for. Sometimes we'll bring some other officers in because some people in a big group, will invent, they may have another issue that they want to do. So we need to do that. So it's about balancing, keeping you safe while you're allowed to do your thing. Putting loads of cops into something is not, it's stopping you saying what you want to say and hearing what needs to be said. So we will always just try and step back as much as we can, just to give you some time and space to say, talk and listen. But those officers in the blue, if you want to know why we're doing something or we're not doing something, or you want to understand why the police are asking you, go and ask them. That's a national thing. They're trained. They go and do special training around that. And they've been working with a lot of people since COVID happened and all the regulations came in. They haven't been wearing their blue jackets, but we've been using them to talk to people that were deciding to come from, I don't know, Bournemouth, to come up to Brighton for the day. When we were in lockdown, why are you doing that? Let me understand. So what you'll keep hearing from the government is about the 4 E's, about explaining and trying. I'll be honest, we cannot arrest our way out of this. That's not the answer. So what we've got to do is work with you, with your consent and your trust, to actually find a way through this, because hopefully COVID will sort itself out. We've got to live together afterwards and make a difference to those that are affected by racism. And so hopefully what we're trying to do, it doesn't matter how many people are there, but actually just to gain your trust and confidence. I know some people won't always trust us, and I understand that, but we're working really hard. So hopefully the protest on Saturday, we are anticipating there's going to be lots and lots of people there. So we are talking about, well, how do we make sure the social distancing and all that? But there will be people within that group who have come for certainly a different reason. So an example, a few days ago now, there was a vigil and a group of boys turned up and they just wanted to take place in some form of antisocial behaviour. Actually, we moved them on to say, let the people that want to carry out their vigil have their vigil. Respect them. You go and do what you need to do. And if we need to enforce the law, we'll do that. But it's all about trying to work with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's really great to see. That is a huge difference between the UK and America, is the difference in how you think about your policing and the training that you receive. That now leads nicely into Jude's question.
Yeah, this question's kind of similar, but we're seeing, from America, protesters getting a bit rowdy and violent, but also police and their handling of it being crazy in America, and certainly what's been shared on social media a bit violent as well. So in the UK, is there what type of protocols are in place for if protests get violent?
Okay, do you want to do that? Shall I?
I think that's your
your
expertise.
Right. Okay. So if you think back, you might have seen some footage in London around the officers that were standing around Parliament and everything around that, and you kind of look at it and you go, well, why are they pushing and shoving? Well, actually, they're probably in there a few hours and they've been trying to have some conversations. There comes a point where not all of the group, but a small group of people have come together for another issue. So it is actually it's an opportunity to go and do something. So the officers will, just by officer presence. So it's really easy to go, well, you're pushing and shoving. Actually, by putting a police officer there, very often we'll either prevent something or we'll disrupt it. If we've got some intelligence or some information that say, actually, there's a small group over there and they're intent, or we know they're going to do something, we have to do something. We have to keep people safe. The use of force, which people get battens out and they're pushing and shoving, that's down to the individual officer, and they have to account for that. But I'll invite any of you up that want to come and see how we train for public order and everything, and actually become the crowd, and then come and stand behind a shield and see what it is. Because I'll tell you what, it's really frightening when people are very angry at you, because you forget you're wearing this uniform and everything, and you think, well, I'm a human being, and I agree with you about racism, but I've got to uphold the law and keep people safe. There are some officers that will go over the top. We've seen that time and time again, and when we do stuff about that, but we try and be as measured as we can. So you saw the horses coming in. They rode in quite quickly, didn't they? If you see horses in Brighton when we bring them in, that's to calm everything down, but they do have the ability to make a difference. So we've got a variety of things that we can use, but I go back to the police liaison officers. They get the mood. They'll tell us if people are getting angry and what the dynamics are. So I've been involved in a lot of protest out on the ground when it's got violent and making decisions, and it's not a nice place to be, and it's a difficult decision to make. Does that make sense? I haven't really answered the question, but it's to just try and give you what it feels like to stand in our shoes, as it were.
What measures do Sussex Police specifically have in place to address racism? And I guess what is maybe both your individual responses to the current occurrence with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement's reaction to it, and then maybe your reaction as Sussex Police as a whole?
So with regards to Sussex Police ourselves then, so I think, my personal opinion is it starts before we even become an officer. So when I get recruited, how do you make sure that you recruit from your community a representative mix of people? And then how do you make sure that representative mix of people isn't racist? And Sussex Police, there's an awful lot of work. A really good person to follow on Twitter is Satna Patel, who's one of our, I can't remember quite what, a positive inclusion officers or something like that. And she goes out and actively tries to recruit people from BAME and other communities who might not previously have thought of policing as being a career for them, or we might not be an employer for them, actively going out and talking to people and inviting them in to consider us as an employer. And then even beyond that, if you're someone that is in a marginalised community and you want to apply for a job here, you can be invited along to a workshop where you can get coached by Satna and her team on exactly how to apply, so that when you come to apply, say for when we recruited for fast track graduate detectives recently, you would then have the absolute best opportunity possible to cross the line successfully and join us, because we've put so much effort into recruiting you in the first place. And then once you're here, a lot of people tell me a lot of good things about it's called our Race Equality Network. So a bit like I'm, for example, part of the Evolve Network, which is the Women or Gender Balance Network. It's the same principle for the Race Equality Network. So people from marginalised communities and also others are welcome to join to positively help one another. Mentoring is something that's taken off quite well within the police, and within mentoring you can specifically select to say, I asked when I got a mentor, could I have a woman and someone that understands what it's like to try and have a career whilst raising a family. You could equally say, can I have a black woman, because I want someone that understands my life experience and having a career in this organisation with that experience. So I think there's quite a lot, I've personally seen quite a lot going on within Sussex Police to make us representative of the community we serve, and then welcoming to those officers when they arrive to be part of Sussex Police.
So just going on from that, internally we have something called Break the Silence. So you can report anything that you're not happy with, you can report it anonymously and it gets dealt with. Very often you'll see whistleblowing going on, and we actively promote that and go from there. Every time you go for to change a job or get promoted, there is always a competency about your respect for race and diversity. And as you get, I've been asked a number of times about how have I supported other people and been as inclusive as I can. And then they'll say, well, why do you do that? And the story for me is I was one of the first part-time officers. I came back and I went to see someone of my equivalent rank and said, will you take me on as an additional officer because I want to work part-time? And they said, it's really difficult because I need a new photocopier for you, and I need the photocopier more than I need you. Not that you're a good person, and I thought, right, you've just excluded me, and I have never forgotten how that made me feel. And so anybody, and it doesn't matter what the colour of your skin is, or whatever, wherever you come from, anybody that's made to feel like that in the organisation, I will actively, and a lot of other people like Jane Dando, who leads on that Equality Network, will challenge and be really, really vocal. And I know, and you might go, yeah, but it's just words, but this is my day book. You can't really see it. And everything that I write on here, so everything that I deal with that goes in here, but I like to write little things just to remind me. And one of them here says, my silence or denial or avoidance gives the approval to the situation. And sometimes when tough decisions have to be made, you just need to go back to something like that. And so I've grown up with a number of people in the organisation who've lived through the dreadful times with Stephen Lawrence and everything around that. And we're not frightened to challenge. But as I said earlier on, it's about being confident that others like you feel like that, and they know that if they stand up and challenge, they'll be supported. So it's kind of, we've come a long way. We're not there yet, are we? There's still all sorts of things. But yeah, I think it's the one challenge, the one worry I have is a lot of officers, BAME officers who've just joined us are feeling a little bit difficult at the moment, because they've joined the police service, but actually the police are now being told, well, you're racist, and they're saying, but you're not. But actually I'm in a difficult position. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with them about where we're going, because, you know, we want to do as much as we can about this. How do we do it? And so we've been listening to them, and they've been sort of giving us some feedback around that as well. So I think there's lots of listening. It's now got to turn those words into action, haven't we, really, if that makes sense.
Can I just ask what your statistics are in terms of how many BAME background individuals you have within Sussex Police?
I think it's about 4%, but I don't quote me on that. I can find out for sure, but I know through SATNA, the fantastic work that SATNA and other people have done, we have really increased, and we've been working really hard on it. We can get the true figures, but I think it's about 4%.
We can move on now to our final question, which is from Emma.
Hello. So obviously you've been asking us about what we feel about George Floyd and everything, but I wondered how you and your colleagues were feeling towards the whole situation, but also more specifically the protests. So looking at the videos, obviously, of all the riots and everything that's happening and all the peaceful protests and the violence that's happening right now, I wondered what you guys thought of that, because obviously that's not how we want to do things in the UK. So I just wondered what your response to that, seeing all of that, was.
Yeah, so with regard to George Floyd's death, it was just so abhorrent. I admit not being able to watch the video all the way to the end, because it just made me feel physically sick. And I just desperately wanted to be one of those police officers watching, so that I could tackle that man, who I won't name, to the floor and remove him, because it's entirely needless, and it's also not the way we're trained to restrain people either. But so it left me quite in that same sense. I mean, I'm not someone of colour, but I'm someone who I so desperately believe in justice and solving the injustices of the world. I just kind of ended up, we had a conversation about American police versus UK police earlier, and we're not the American police, but we have the same name, and we wear a uniform, and we represent something. And it put me in a bit of a position of conflict in my own mind for a short period of time before. I mean, I'm quite a reflective person anyway, but then I reflected on it a bit more and thought, he doesn't represent me. He doesn't represent what I stand for. I've got no influence over him and his behaviour, but what I do have an influence over is how I behave, how I react to this, and how I participate in conversations that are happening all around me in my office. I didn't hear a single officer say a bad thing about it, but actually a lot of officers felt aggrieved that they were being targeted. And then that conversation has very maturely progressed on from, oh, I understand, it's not about me, it's not about me feeling aggrieved, it's about how people watching that feel, and how people watching that feel with the context of their own lives and their own lived experiences in the UK and their own interactions with the police, which vary wildly up and down the country. And I think if people of different ages and different generations have a different experience. So I think in some ways it's been really positive. It's enabled some really positive conversations that I've actually been really proud to take part of. And in some ways I look forward to seeing what the progress is we make off of the back of this.
For me, it's a really powerful thing. I did watch it. I was disgusted. One of the things for me was, sorry, why is everybody standing around and watching and not doing something? It's wrong. And that's the first thing. So whether they can say it wasn't me, that's not the answer. They stood by and watched that happen. So I have very strong feelings about every police officer that was there, because it's just wrong. That's the first thing. And secondly, I'll just go back to the thing about Rosa Parks. A few years ago, I went to Washington, and the power of what Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, and in the 1960s, we've kind of lost our way. And I think this is probably, with everything that's going on, this is the time now to really make a difference. And I know people say, well, George you know, he had a bit of a checkered background. It doesn't matter. He's a human being. He's a son. He's a brother. He's a friend. He's a, you know, he's got a mother. He's a human being, and he has the right to life. And that's what policing is all about. It is about the absolute right to life. And yes, there are times when we have to stop people harming others, but George did not deserve that, and his family don't deserve that as well, and everybody involved around that. The only thing I hope now is we actually learn something about it, and you know, I think Elvis Presley said, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. We have got to come together on this, and I just hope, not just about the police service, but everywhere, because it's like the NHS and everything. They will see things going on there. Everybody can make a contribution and do that. So I hope that actually it's not about what are the police doing, what are you doing, it's about what are we doing, because it's an inclusive responsibility, isn't it? And that anybody that grows up who's born today will look back and say, wow, that was a really big moment in time, and yes, I want to go on and join the police, or I want to do this because I trust them and I know that they are committed to this. So I mean, for me, I just really hope that we just harness this properly, because it's a wasted opportunity, and it doesn't do anything to respect the memory of George and everybody affected by that. So so that's the thing. And then for me, I just, you know, thank you as well, Lola. We've had lots of conversations, and I don't think, and you guys as well, you don't realise the importance of you telling us what you think, because it is important that we get feedback. It's really important that you say what you think, you know, not in a rude way, but in an objective way, because actually what I wrote on my book is what somebody said to me a long time ago, and it's stuck with me all the way through. So we are listening to you. You just got to keep reinforcing that message. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. It's so fantastic to hear from you, someone who's high up in the police, that you are listening and that you do. We need to make the police more human. We need to have more conversations like this, so when people see the uniform, they don't just see the uniform, they see the person behind it as well. Can I just say thank you so much, everyone, today? It's been really amazing. And can I just say thank you so much, Jane and Roisin, for giving your time. And this discussion has been so important for all of generations. And we all feel really passionate about this, and change is going to come. We just have to keep pushing for it.
And flip that round. Thank you for your time, because actually it's the time for people like us to sit down and listen. And I'm really grateful that you've been prepared to sit down and talk to us.